Destination Mark.
Hey guys, how's it going? Marcelo here. When you look back at the most popular characters that helped make the original PlayStation a household name, you'll see they defined many different genres. Cloud represented the RPG Final Fantasy, Snake had a lock on action-adventure stealth with Metal Gear Solid, Kazuya and Heihachi made a name for PS1 fighting games with Tekken, and Crash and Spyro defined 3D platformers. The Bandicoot and Dragons specifically were synonymous with PS1, and even throughout the next couple generations, and all the devs and publishers who would get a hold of them, the two stayed pretty close together, even to this day with the last game both appeared in being Crash Team Rumble. There was always one complaint I'd heard get tossed around though, and it simultaneously made complete and no sense. Why are the two so close? Why can't Spyro just get a new game already so he can stop existing in Crash's shadow? Why do the two keep crossing over? And the short answer is, have you played any of the games before? Crash and Spyro have a crazy history together, both franchises going through nearly the same stuff, and even their original devs having so much more in common than you might have thought or remembered. So what we're going to do today is take a small deep dive and explore Crash and Spyro's past, look at where they started, their first major crossover, and where each series has gone from there, how they split off, reunited, and where they could possibly go after Rumble. With that said, let's begin. I've always said Crash and Spyro are like two brothers from other mothers, and it's absolutely no secret that they make all kinds of appearances in each other's games. But how did that start? Eerily enough, the Bandicoot and Dragons similarities started before their franchises ever even began. In 1994, Jason Rubin and Andy Gavin got a signed deal with Universal Interactive Studios to publish their 3DO title Way of the Warrior, and later a 3-game contract that involved a housing deal that put them on the Universal Studios backlog. And just 2 years later, in '96, Insomniac would undergo much of the same. Mark Cerny, who also helped Jason and Andy with Crash, saw potential in Insomniac with their game Disruptor, and signed them on to the same 3-game deal right across the hall from Naughty Dog. Crash hit the scene in 1996, and Spyro followed thereafter in 1998. It's very important that I mention this 2-year gap, as it'll factor in later. Mark Cerny was the go-to Universal guy for both teams, and artist Charles Zimbillis would go on to design the official looks for both Crash and Spyro. And from there, we're off to the races. The dogs and Insomniacs got along very well with one another, being competitive but remaining friendly. This relationship resulted in demos for Crash 3, CTR, and Crash Bash being hidden in Spyro 1, 2, and 3, and vice versa, and several Crash references in Spyro 3, namely the side-scrolling Sheila missions being named Crash Kangaroo, and the word Bandicoot as a potential answer to Algire's riddle in Haunted Tomb. Then, when the next console generation was approaching, Naughty Dog and Insomniac found themselves in a pickle. While Universal's publishing rights went to Sony, and both wanted to work directly with the latter, that meant cutting ties with the former. And seeing as Universal owned Crash and Spyro, the creators had to say goodbye to their creations. But with all said and done, the similarities didn't stop. Naughty Dog went on to make Jak and Daxter, and Insomniac made Ratchet and Clank, which continued to reference one another, and Crash and Spyro were passed on to different devs, but they still fell down the same sort of path. Both had a very safe 4th mainline game that the fans are quick to call bad. They both had a 5th mainline game that dared to change up bits of their established formulas and take on a more comedic, satirical tone, and they even got GBA games around the exact same time. The Crash ones made by Vicarious Visions and the Spyro ones by Digital Eclipse. But then, something interesting happened. Up until this point, Crash and Spyro had references in each other's games, and their franchises were going down very similar paths, but in 2004, 20 years ago, they'd finally cross over for the first time. Enter Crash Purple Ripto's Rampage and Spyro Orange The Cortex Conspiracy, 2 GBA minigame titles that smashed the Bandicoot and Dragons worlds together. I, for one, loved this. The marketing was utterly insane, the commercials were iconic, and I personally thought the games were really fun. Ask others though, and you'll find this was not the crossover they wanted. Why are we playing minigames? Why couldn't this crossover be a bigger budgeted console release? Why couldn't the crossover be a platformer with the two? These are the only things you'll hear from people regarding this 2-pack now, and I think more credit needs to be given to this idea. Around this time we were getting to Insanity and A Hero's Tale, which were ambitious in their own right, so I for one didn't mind that this mashup was only on handheld. It was certainly an era I wouldn't ever forget. After Spyro appeared for a cameo in Twinsanity and Crash in the GBA version of Legend of Spyro New Beginning, and the console version of Eternal Night, that was it for both franchises. Activision had gotten a hold of the rights to the pair, and Crash underwent a 6-year hiatus while Spyro was shoved into Skylanders. But just when it felt like all hope of seeing Crash again was lost, E3 2016 happened. I cannot begin to describe that feeling we all experienced when the orchestra began playing the Warp theme and Sean Layden's shadow was in the shape of Crash. It was electrifying. I didn't really vibe with Crash's Skylanders implementation at first, but after seeing Thumper Wumpa Islands in action with the B-roll footage, I quickly grew fond of it. And this inclusion meant that the Bandicoot and Dragon were back together once again. Crash and Coco made a few appearances in the Netflix show Skylanders Academy, and then we got the proper reintroductions to Crash and Spyro with N-Sane and Reignited, all under the umbrella of Activision and developed respectively by Vicarious Visions and Skylanders creators Toys for Bob. And from here, the references continued. We got the old in-game references back, and a super cool nod to the demo cheats with the trailer for Reignited playing if you punched in the old code while highlighting Crash 3 and N-Sane. That was awesome. And after all that, Crash was here to stay. We got CTR Nitro Field, a new mobile game with Crash on the run, the first new game in the series since Mind Over Mutant with Crash 4 It's About Time, and an online PvP game with Rumble. And Spyro wasn't forgotten either, as he's either fully playable or referenced in every single one of these, further solidifying the two franchises' bond. But something was amiss here. It was awesome seeing the pair team up so much in this modern era of Crash and Spyro, but where is Spyro's next game? Ever since the revival, Crash has gotten 4 remastered titles and 3 brand new games, but Spyro only has Reignited. Well, the short story for that is explained in Liam Robertson's Crash 5 video, which we'll be referring to again later. But for now, I want to focus on the attention and reception to both franchises, and characters to boot, because to a lot of Spyro fans, it always seems like Spyro is still very much indeed in Crash's shadow. This is where the 2-year gap comes in. Let's rewind back to the mid-90s. When Crash exploded onto the scene in '96, no one had seen a 3D platformer quite like Crash before. And at the E3 booth, the Bandicoot was stationed right across the way from none other than Mario, who was also making his 3D debut with Super Mario 64. But despite that, the interest was most definitely there right away, and when Crash released to the public, he exploded in popularity. At that point, it was solidified that 3D platformers were about to become all the rage. 2 years later, in '98, Spyro makes his debut, and originally, the game didn't sell too well.
In Europe, it took off pretty much from the get-go, but in the US, it definitely was slow.
It didn't catch on right away.
It bizarrely took Spyro a while to start climbing up those graphs, but once he did, he was starting to get recognized just as much as Crash. And with the aforementioned bond between Naughty Dog and Insomniac, plus all the references, the two became unofficial brothers. But, that said, you can say Crash is the big brother and Spyro is the little brother. You can also say that, because of this, metaphorically, Spyro is the Luigi to Crash's Mario. Here are some examples to accentuate this thought. Crash made it big over in Japan, with a lot of that cultural influence being injected right back into the series proper, but too many changes to Spyro's gameplay over in Japan resulted in the franchise not having as much of an impact. And not every Spyro game even made it over there, while most of Crash's did. Check anyone's top-ranking PS1 games from '98 to 2000, and Crash will most likely always be ranked higher than Spyro. I search top PS1 games on Google Images, and I promise you most of the thumbnails will feature Crash, but not Spyro. Hell, even the way the two get representation in other games can be seen this way. As in Astro's Playroom, Crash gets all the glory he deserves. A bot dressing up as him and doing the dance, a little prop Aku floating beside him, a bunch of crates and Wumpa fruit behind him, and he's found in a jungle at that. Spyro is a tiny figurine, being admired in the PlayStation Labo, sure, and having a funny interaction if you punch him, but that's it. And he's mixed in so deep with a boatload of other references here that he's actually quite easy to miss if you don't know where to look. And in the recent Astrobot PS5 game, Crash can be found alongside Jack when you rescue him, and there's even a trophy tied to doing the Crash dance with him, while Spyro just chills all by himself in this little corner, with no gacha item you can win for him. What is up with that? Why is it that Spyro gets so overlooked, or seen as secondary to Crash? I, unfortunately, can't give you a definitive answer. But we can speculate that it might just be due to circumstance. Spyro debuting 2 years after Crash, not selling as well out the gate the way Crash did, not making as huge of an impact in Japan like Crash did, and not even fully influencing the Toys to Life franchise he appeared in. Spyro's identity has always been dictated by his contemporaries, and that in turn makes his franchise feel less significant. But of course we all know that it's absolutely not. Spyro deserves just as much praise and attention as his Bandicoot brother, and that is why I, for one, still fight to see a proper brand new Spyro game come to fruition, doing big bold things that even Crash can't do. Listen, I love these guys. Asking me to choose between them is like asking me to pick a favorite child. I just can't do it. Even though, ironically, even I haven't played all the Spyro games. I still have most of the GBA titles and Dawn of the Dragon to get to. And this all culminates in what was supposed to be the biggest game for both characters we would have gotten, but instead is now a cancelled dream. The reveal of what was supposed to be Crash 5. Yes, it was still a Crash game with Spyro in it, but this title was going to be hella ambitious. In short, this was going to be the game fans had asked for back when Crash and Spyro first crossed over. Crash 5 was a full open 3D platformer where we would have controlled both Crash and Spyro, and together the two were on a mission to stop Uka Uka from merging the Bandicoot and Dragons worlds together. And back in the day, I remember asking myself after seeing the original complaints, well wait, how would a 3D platformer crossover game even work? And I got my answer right here. We were going to control Crash on foot, Spyro in the air, and the two together like the friggin' beginning of Rayman 3. The ideas Toys for Bob came up with were crazy, and this would have been such a fun game to play. Unfortunately, this was the last cancelled game from the devs under Activision, and now that they're independent, we've got to wait and see what they're working on next. But I'm still sticking to my guns and stating that those Spyro-ish hints we've been getting from Toys for Bob may truly be hinting at the Dragon's next adventure. And that's the crazy history between Crash and Spyro. These guys have been attached at the hip pretty much since Naughty Dog and Insomniac first became friends. And looking back on how the franchises have evolved, they've stayed very close for quite some time. Even when they did their own things, they were still referenced. Even when Spyro was in a whole other franchise, they still found their way to each other. It goes without saying that you can't have Crash without Spyro. The two are just so closely related. So, what will the future bring? If you ask me, it's too soon to tell. Toys for Bob just went indie, and now that Microsoft owns Activision, any Crash and Spyro games that come from Toys for Bob will be made possible because of them. So we'll see how the workflow evens itself out with all this in mind. I just hope that it means both Crash and Spyro get equal time to shine with new games. But this means we'll have to give Spyro just as much of a chance, because frankly, after all the Dragon's been through, he more than deserves it. Here's to hoping the future is bright for both Crash and Spyro. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, check out the others I've done here, and be sure to subscribe, like, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Until then, I'm Mark, and take care.